All right, good morning. It is 10 a.m. on Friday, September 25th, and I'm calling the September 25th, 2020 meeting of the Historic Resources Advisory Committee to order. This is the second day of the second meeting of the Historic Resources Advisory Committee, also known as HRAC, to consider applications from the 6th biennial appropriations of funding for the Minnesota Historical and Cultural Heritage Grants Program from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. These grants are made possible by the people of Minnesota who voted on November 4th, 2008 to pass the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment to the Minnesota Constitution to support efforts to preserve Minnesota's land, water, and legacy, including our state's history and cultural heritage. Every year, this meeting is highly anticipated by grant applicants throughout the state for consideration of projects to preserve and enhance access to Minnesota's cultural and historical resources, and to support projects of enduring value for the cause of history and historic preservation across the state. This meeting is a time to celebrate and commemorate the history of our state. Thank you, committee members and staff, for attending this meeting, and welcome to the grant applicants and guests. We're going to start off with a round of introductions today, and I'll ask the HRAC members to introduce themselves, and we will also just tell a little bit of where you're from or why you're on the HRAC committee. So I'll just go through this list and ask people to go. Annette Atkins.
Good morning. My name is Annette Atkins. I am a professor emerita of history at St. John's University and the College of St. Benedict, and a longtime scholar of Minnesota history.
Thank you, Annette. Tamara Edible.
I'm with the Clearwater County Historical Society and also Minnesota's Historic Northwest.
Thank you. Is Simea Garrison with us today? I do not see her. Okay. Christy Jeffcoat.
I'm Christy Jeffcoat. I am Senior Paintings Conservator at the Midwest Art Conservation Center here in Minneapolis.
Thank you, Christy. Jenny Lakovic.
Unmute, there we go. I'm Jenny Lakovic. I'm a registered architect in Minnesota, and I focus on historic preservation. I've also been on the Minneapolis HPC for 13 years.
Thank you, Jenny. Bob Mack.
Good morning, I'm Bob Mack. I'm a principal with MacDonald and Mack Architects, a firm specializing in preservation projects around the country. And I am also a professor emeritus at the University of Minnesota, where I taught the historic preservation sequence for about 22 years.
Thank you, Bob. Lindsay Marshall.
I'm Lindsay Marshall. I'm the director and curator at Lake of the Woods County Historical Society.
Thank you, Lindsay. Rick Nash.
Hi, I'm Rick Nash. Good morning. I live in New Prague. I was the former adjutant general for the state of Minnesota for the Army and Air National Guard, and commissioner for Governor Plenty and Governor Dayton, and the commissioner for Department of Military Affairs. Also spent 32 years in the precast, pre-stressed architectural concrete business. And I'm on the executive council at Minnesota Historical Society.
Thank you, Rick. Matt Piscatelli.
Good morning, I'm Matt Piscatelli. I'm a principal investigator and digital media manager at Search. We're a nationwide cultural resource management firm. Prior to Search, I was on the grants team at the National Geographic Society. I currently live in Brooklyn Park, formerly of Chaska.
Thank you, Matt. Marika Reese.
Hi, I'm Marika. I'm based in the Twin Cities. I have a mental health company. Before that, I was a history teacher, and I did my MED with emphasis in history.
Thank you, Marika. Ben, I'm messing up your name already. Ben Vanderkooi.
Thank you. I'm the Laverne City Attorney down in Southwest Minnesota. I'm also a member of the Executive Council of the Historical Society. And for about 10 years now, I've been an advisor to the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Thank you, Ben. Jill Wanuka.
Hi, I'm Jill Wanuka, and I'm the director at the Candia County Historical Society in Wilmer, and I'm also involved with the West Central Minnesota Historical Association.
Thank you, Jill. We also have David Hackinson and Dan Schmeckel, who are not present. I'm Jonathan Palmer. I am the Executive Director of the Hallie Key Brown Community Center, which is a 91-year-old African-American social service agency in St. Paul, and very passionate about history. We also have MNHS staff in attendance. They will be joining the meeting today and will participate as necessary. A couple public announcements before we start our deliberations. This is a public meeting subject to Minnesota's open meeting law. A list of the applications received and the amount requested has been published on the MNHS Legacy Grant page. While the public is encouraged to attend and listen to the HRAC discussion, they are not permitted to make presentations or participate in the discussion. Each application has been thoroughly reviewed by the Grants Office staff, and each member of the Historic Resources Advisory Committee. Grants requesting over 100,000 were also reviewed by an independent peer reviewer not associated with HRAC or the Grants Office. The Grants Office staff and peer reviewer comments, when applicable, are provided to HRAC members before this meeting. Based on the application review criteria and reviewers' comments, HRAC members assign a rating between 1 and 10, with 10 being excellent. These scores are used to calculate the cumulative average and mode score for each application and start the deliberations. HRAC will also consider geographical and grant subcategories. HRAC will also recommend approval or return of each application to the Minnesota Historical Society's Executive Council for final action. Releasing information or discussing applications after the Friday, September 25th meeting, including and sharing the HRAC's recommendations until after the Minnesota Historical Society's Executive Council has made the final approval, is not allowed by HRAC members or staff of MNHS. All applicants will be notified in writing by the Grants Office of these decisions no later than December 1st, 2020. So just a little point of clarification. The ratings that all of the HRAC members do is a starting point for our deliberations, but essentially all of the applications that are brought forward are considered by the HRAC members. Any of those can be brought forward for recommendation. The ratings that we do are not a litmus test of any kind. It's just a starting point to look at where each one of the individual HRAC members, and there's 15 of us, rank the individual proposals. We all have different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. And so it allows us to come together and share across our different experiences a way to talk about, discuss, and deliberate over proposals. The committee will take periodic breaks. During the breaks, the committee members will refrain from discussing applications. There will be a lunch break for half an hour from approximately 1 to 1:30 p.m., subject to change if we are finishing up early or we stop at an earlier point. Committee members will recuse themselves from this meeting for any application for which they declared a conflict of interest. Committee members will go to the virtual waiting room during the discussion and motion of the application. They will re-enter the meeting after business is concluded for that application. For the Minnesota Historical and Cultural Grants Program, a total of 72 final applications were received, requesting a little over $8.3 million. Of the 72 final applications, MNHS followed policies outlined in the grants manual in processing all applications. 3 applications were found to be incomplete or ineligible, and therefore HRAC did not review them. All applications not funded will be notified and encouraged to reapply as appropriate after the MNHS Executive Council final approval. The committee will be considering the remaining 69 applications, requesting a total of $7.7 million. We made some decisions yesterday that I will go over. A total of $7,004,000 was available from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund for the grants program in fiscal year 2021, the second year of the biennium. The COVID-19 crisis has impacted the sales tax revenues, which is the source of the legacy funding. Per guidance from the Minnesota Management and Budget, the legacy funds were decreased by 14%. After administrative costs, 1 small grant cycle this summer, and reserving funds for 3 more small grant cycles for the remainder of the fiscal year, there has been $3.6 million available for award. That ends the public record. I'm going to go over the meeting norms now so that we're all on the same page. Before we start our second day of deliberations, here are the ground rules. Everyone participates, no one dominates. One speaker at a time. Be concise when we speak. Encourage others to participate. If members need to excuse themselves from the meeting for personal reasons, please turn off your microphone and camera and post a message in the chat when you leave and upon your return. Topics outside the agenda will be documented and tabled for the 2021 spring meeting. Please ask to be recognized by the chair before you speak. Does anybody have any discussion on the meeting norms? Seeing none, well, let's recap the items discussed and consented to by the committee members on the first day. We agreed to use the average score to sort applications for the start of our deliberations. Yesterday, we agreed the high score group was 7.45 and above. That was the group of applications we started our deliberations. We also then selected $1 million as being the remaining funds to open it up to all of the applications for consideration, but at any point, any of those could have also been brought forward. We considered applications at that point, and just a recap of the applications that were recommended for funding. Carolyn, I think if you go ahead and share your screen, we can run through those right quick.
Yes. John, can you allow me to share my screen, please?
There you go.
Thank you.
Okay, so yesterday we started with a total of $3,600,000. We recommended $3,476,613. We have a remaining balance of $123,387 to go ahead and award. Do you want us to look at the ones, or is that not necessary at this point?
Jonathan, are you asking me?
I'm asking you, Carolyn. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do we need to review those?
I think I leave that up to HRAC to see if they want to review the ones that they funded from yesterday. I think usually, typically, when you've allocated all the money, you run through them individually just to say them out loud. But it's up to you if you want to do that currently to refresh people's memories.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody saying that we want to go through that. So we can pull back the main screen to us. Couple reminders before we deliberate. Committee members must excuse themselves from the discussion and motions. If a conflict of interest is declared, a committee member will be placed in the virtual waiting room and return when business is concluded. Any motion to recommend denying funding an application must specifically state a reason. If there is a motion to fund an application, there's not a second, or the motion fails in the vote, the application will not be recommended for funding. If staff conditions stated in staff review comments are acceptable to HRAC, the motion must include them. We made a motion yesterday to automatically include the recommendations from staff. Committee has general discussion. So at this point, we can open this up to take a look at where we want to go. We have the amount that was still left. Do you want to look at the remaining applications that fall within the criteria, meaning that they're eligible based on amount? I'm seeing head nods. Carolyn, can you pull that back up for your screen?
Jonathan, while we're waiting for that, this has been just a very quick comment. I don't know if we have a quorum requirement, but I have another commitment at noon today. So I'm hoping within the next 2 hours, we can get all the final numbers put on the table.
Thank you, Ben.
Jonathan,
yep.
As I'm doing this, just a reminder, the committee, we do go through all applications to give feedback. So I would think there would be enough time by noon, but.
I think we will be able to get through by noon. So as a reminder, what Carolyn's talking about is after we make these deliberations, we're going to go ahead and give comments on all of the applications, because some were not brought forward for funding. It's helpful to the applicants to be aware of what reviewers saw, and that will help them improve applications for the future or give them guidance on what they can do.
Jonathan, yesterday I only included those that have not had any discussion, declined, voting motions. Do you want to see just the ones that have not had any discussions on, or do you want to see others that fall within that criteria amounts?
I
But
think
still had discussion about.
let's do the ones without discussion, that have not been discussed or deliberated over.
Okay. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so these are all the ones that have not had any discussion. Are there any of these that people would like to bring forward, either for a recommendation or discussion? If not, we can look back at the whole list of ones that have not been funded at this point or not been recommended for declination.
Jonathan, I'd offer to open up the discussion on Capone Art Park.
Okay. Let us bring that one.
I have a conflict of interest with that one.
Okay. We are sending Christy out to the virtual waiting room. All right. Capone.
And I guess, okay, sorry, Jonathan.
Oh, no, we've got Capone is, okay, so, sorry, I had not sorted the spreadsheet in a way so I could give everybody guidance on where to go to.
Line item 58.
Line item 58, thank you so much. And it is average score of 6, eligible amount $42,380, and conservation treatment of Pompeii, a sculpture by Anthony Capone. And I will open it up to you, Jenny.
Thank you. This is one that I had a question for staff, because I think the staff feedback is probably what steered people away from this one. The applicant does not meet the procurement guidelines set out in the grants manual, but they did try to get 3 proposals. So I guess my question for the staff reviewer is, was that comment made before or after, or did it consider the fact that they tried to get 3 proposals? I wanted to just verify why, or whether that could be conditioned, or if they really just do not qualify. Because if they didn't qualify, they wouldn't be in this round, right? So there must be a way of conditioning that, or maybe not. But anyway, if one of the staff, MNH staff, could comment on that eligibility, be helpful.
Hey, I reviewed this project. It is definitely conditionable. This project is definitely eligible.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Because I mean, this is one that we've given them funding before, and I thought this proposal was really well laid out, and they did their homework. They hired. I mean, they're going about it the right way. It's a logical process. They hired a conservator to come in and give them guidance, and they're following that guidance. So this is one that, the only red flag for me was the staff comment on procurement, but it's kind of a unique, it's kind of unique, and I think it's been probably difficult to get people who are who have the qualifications to deal with it, but they actually found the right people. So this is one that I actually would support funding for. So I guess I can make a motion to fund. I may as well do that, right? I'll make a motion to fund Caponi Art Park conservation treatment for the Pompey sculpture.
This is Ben. I'll second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Does it have like the condition of getting, like how you were pointing out the procurement? Okay.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I want to clarify on the procurement conditions. Usually if there's a procurement condition, it's not of, it's of low concern to us about the entire application. If that helps justify it. So to us, it's just like a formality for them to do procurement condition that we add. So it's not anything like, oh no, this is serious. Usually it's a misunderstanding that they potentially misunderstand the requirements of the procurement process, and it's easily conditionable and easily for them to provide us additional information.
Okay, good. Yeah, and the fact that they've had several other successful grants. I mean, they've been smaller, but still, I think, they're familiar enough with the process that I think this one could be successful. So, okay. Thanks, Carolyn.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call for a roll call so we can accurately record. So I call your name, say aye or nay. Ben?
Aye.
Rick?
Nay.
Jill?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Was that an aye, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Jenny?
Aye.
Lindsay?
Aye.
Annette?
Aye.
Marika?
Aye.
And I got Tamara.
Nay.
All right. I have 8 ayes and 2 nays. So the motion passes. And we can bring Christy back in. All right. Now, can we go ahead and pull back to the screen again and see if anybody has any others they want to pull?
I'd like to look at geographic again, because I think that the Northwest region is lacking.
Okay. Can we switch over to that, Carolyn? Northwest, we scroll a little bit further down. Nope, I'm sorry. My lineup is correct. All right, so Northwest is 173,000 out of 173,240 have been allocated out of a total request for 617,832. I think that's roughly 15%, am I right?
One is 28%.
28%. I'm way off. Thanks, Ben.
And Northeast is 29%.
Okay.
So the northern third of Minnesota is where we really have not done very much.
Okay. So let's see, do we have any of the ones that are represented in our grouping that are coming from the northern section?
I think the only one left is Clay County. And I think that was dead last on my list.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, I wouldn't mind revisiting Pope again. I really think that's a doable project.
Yeah. And I just want to remind, we want to try as much as we can to spread as wide as possible, but we don't want to force through ones that are not meeting the criteria there is. So did you want to bring Pope back to the table?
We can discuss others. I just want to
Okay,
Make my thoughts known.
well, it is up to the committee. Anybody who wants to bring anyone up for discussion, maybe we should go back and look at the full ones that are not funded at this point and have not been turned down.
Jonathan, there's one I wouldn't mind bringing back for discussion.
Okay,
Annette made a passion plea for it, but it's one that I would maybe want to bring back just into the discussion, and that's Minnesota Special Education Leaders Foundation, line item 17.
okay. All right, so we are looking at line item 17, all right. Sorry, it is taking me quite a minute. And this was the special education. There we go. We had ranked it, the average score was 7.85. The Minnesota Special Education Leaders Foundation, the professionally edit the history of educating, not educating Minnesota's children with disabilities. The request is $45,472. Right? So, Jenny, did you want to start discussion?
Yeah, and we did discuss this yesterday, and Annette, I know you were concerned about the cost and just having a number. I think your point was, and I don't want to paraphrase you, you can jump in, but I think your point was that having an editor and a writer simultaneously was unusual. But I guess my question is it really unusual to have an editor review the work, make suggestions, and then have someone pick up the red lines? To me, when I went back and looked at this one again, because it's one that I thought, again, I thought this one was important. It's already having significant impact, even in its draft form. And they've really been very methodical in their process. The fact that it's already benefiting people, this is one that I thought was one of the stronger applications. Again, not my area of expertise as far as what's reasonable price-wise, but the way the work was divided, and it seemed reasonable to just go through the final edits, make sure that this is just polished, and then it goes out the door for publication. I thought this one was I went back and really thought this one was still pretty strong. So I just wanted to bring this one up again, because I think this one is stronger than some of the others that we have now at the bottom of the list. This one averaged, the average score on this was 7.06. Line item 17, the average score was 7.85.
Yep.
So this one I think resonated with people. So I just wanted to bring this one back in for discussion.
Okay. Does anybody want to discuss? Bob?
I'll just put in a couple words. My son is a published author from both Penguin and Norton, and he's always worked with his editor, and it's not just red lines. Sometimes it's major reorganization, it's including things here or taking things out there. So having an author and an editor work closely together, I don't think it is at all unusual.
Yeah.
No, and my point wasn't exactly that. It's that there's an author and an editor and now a consultant. And so we're paying the consultant to make the changes, not the author. So, I mean, I have always worked with an editor and I have found them extraordinarily helpful. I've never spent that much money on an editor, nor did I bring in a third person to pay another $20,000 to. That was sort of my point, that the author has been paid significantly already. And it seems to me that it's the author's job to take those editorial comments and integrate them. Bringing a third person in is part of what felt excessive to me. Plus, we've already spent $100,000, nearly $100,000 on this project. And that's so out of line for what historians ever get for the work that they do. I would have a hard time defending that to my scholarly colleagues who have been hard pressed to get even small writing publishing grants through HRAC.
Any other discussion?
I think Annette needs to be better paid. I'm kind of going back now and looking to see if what else they ascribe, what the duties are for their consultant coordinator.
Jonathan,
Yes.
I just want to remind you that this was a recommendation to decline.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so just so that you know
Oh.
that it was a decline, not a motion to fund, and it failed to vote. It was a motion to decline, and it passed. So that we are aware of that.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted, so I just, Annette, you're holding steady on this one, so.
And obviously I'm going to vote no, and I encourage everyone to vote your conscience on this. As we do in each case, we make independent decisions. So I've said my piece.
And there wouldn't be, there's no vote on this since we've already voted to decline it. We'd have to go back and motion to reconsider. Ben?
I was just going to make that point. It's a motion to reconsider. Right. Someone who was on the other side has to change their mind.
Right. So shall we return to the list and move to other ones?
Well, Ginny, do you want to vote to reconsider?
Well, what we would have to do is somebody, one, we'd have to make a motion to reconsider, and then another motion to go ahead and do some action with regards to this. If people are really would like to do this, we can go through that process, but I think since we have a number of others that we haven't considered at this point that we're still looking at, I would hold that out to be a little bit later in the process. That's my suggestion, but if you want to, we can bring that forward.
I think, I would, there's a couple others that we haven't discussed that would be, I think to keep it fair, we should give everybody their fair shake at it. But my personal opinion is that this is stronger than most of the ones that we have left that are within the funding range. So I may come back and make that motion, but I think right now let's keep going with the ones that haven't been discussed.
Okay.
Sorry, Ginny.
No, that's thanks.
Jonathan, can I make one other point? We're down to I think we've got 81,000 left. There are very few combinations at work. We may be able to do 2 more. So it's not like we've got the luxury of, we can do this and there'll be plenty of money left. So I would point that out to the group.
Thank you, Ben. Carolyn, can we see the list of ones that would still fall into the criteria under the amount we have left? Okay. Are there any of those that anybody would like to pull in for discussion? Not the Washington County one, that one's a little bit high.
And then the 88,000 one as well. Sauk Center, that's off the table.
Thank you, Ben.
And the Institute for Ag and Trade Policy. Carolyn's doing her work. Why don't we wait a moment?
That sounds like a good idea.
I appreciate the help though, Ben. I don't know that I would have seen some of them, so thank you. I think I got them all right.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we allowed to talk about the Mower County one? I don't remember where we left off yesterday, but now Matt's here, so he might have insight.
It was discussed. There was no decision, so yes, that can be brought back. Would you like that, Lindsay?
I would like that, yes.
Okay. All right, let's talk about Mauer.
Matt, I was mostly interested in wondering what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a request for $59,738. It's the Grand Meadow Church Quarry, Mauer County Historical Society. And then we can go back to the large group.
I ranked this one high. And again, yeah, Matt, you weren't here yesterday for this discussion. This is one that be good to get, really great to get your feedback on. So Lindsay, thank you for bringing this one back up, because this is one that was high on my list.
Yeah, and similarly, it was high on mine as well. And apologies for stepping out at the most inconvenient times yesterday. My comments, hopefully to discuss, but a lot to unpack. Is sort of where my head was when I originally reviewed this. I think part of the and just to refresh everyone's memory, it's an archaeological site, the Grand Meadow Quarry. But I think some of the issues I had to think about in the beginning is, there's one of the stakeholders here in this cooperative project is the Archaeology Conservancy, the TAC, which is a wonderful organization that literally saves archaeological sites by becoming custodians of them. And they're nationwide, but they do have a presence here in the Midwest. The project's great because it hits all of the giving back, the educational aspects to stewardship. Where it gets challenging and where I struggle to unpack it is all of the roles of the different nonprofits and the different players here. That was hard in my initial review. So I actually gave it a high score to fund. And so if you guys could actually refresh what were sort of the concerns that were brought up yesterday that might be easier to address, because it looks like we didn't actually fund it or vote on it.
So
Jonathan, I think, yeah,
I can raise mine. So I need Jill or Tamara, one of you want to take over the leadership?
I'll take over.
Okay. My concern, Matt, was the fact that they had Native involvement, but they had not budgeted for that. That was a major sticking point for me. And my point with that is in regards to tribal, it says tribal input should be mandatory. I think it definitely should be. And oftentimes what happens with communities of color is we're brought in, but we're not compensated for the expertise, for the information, for the knowledge. So the fact that they had not put in any kind of a budget for the outreach, for participation, that the project partners were not the Native groups. That was the piece that concerned me, because oftentimes what we see, and especially in Minnesota, the interpretation of communities of colors and BIPOC communities through the lens of white groups. And I think if we're going to go ahead and do these things right, one, we have to include communities of color on an equitable framework. And two, there should be compensation provided for the expertise that they're bringing to the table. And so that was my major concern around this.
And I know this is not it wasn't a Roberts motion, but I second that thought. You're exactly right in terms of compensation, right? It's walking the walk of having that input, but then everyone being on an equal playing field. So if I had to make a recommendation to said applicant, I would encourage to come back for more money with incorporating that budget item. Compensating all partners equally, I think is smart.
Is it possible that there's an arrangement that they just didn't claim?
It's possible, but we have only what they put in here to be able to go by.
Mm-hmm. No, I guess my question was, is that something that, again, this isn't my area of expertise, but are there long-term relationships or not sure what the word I'm looking for, but agreements that people are working together, and that just wouldn't, maybe just wasn't included in the application. Again, yeah, we can't assume or guess, but I was just wondering if that's something that happens, if anyone knows.
I mean, private consultation is definitely part of the process of any archaeological research when you engage with certain stakeholders. So, you know, just like you work with the SHPO, if it somehow is related to a reservation or something, you work with the TIPO. And so that's just the process. So I'm assuming that they are doing that outreach. I mean, it's all indication that they are. But to Jonathan's point, you know, having that compensation, I think, is important.
Are TIPOs compensated? I mean, like SHPO doesn't get paid per project. Do the TIPOs get paid per project? I mean, I guess this is what I'm trying to get my head around is, you know, in some cases that might be, you know, again, depending on the body, that would be considered bribery, or it would be considered unethical to pay somebody. And I guess I don't really understand how all of those arrangements work, but in this case, but that may be something that is not even on the table.
Rick's been trying to get in for a few minutes here.
Mr. Chairman, I gave a lot of thought to this in your comments last night as we closed out the day with regards to this particular project. And it just struck me that, you know, and I had the comment yesterday when we discussed it, that they talked in the application about it has Dakota participation to coordinate. It doesn't go into a lot of details, certainly doesn't address the chairman's comment about compensation for those that are consulting. But it seems to me that I think we're assuming that they're not doing something that we assume they should be doing. That is paying for participation from the Native Americans from that region or the tribes that represented it. And it was a transient location, obviously, in the application from those from the east transiting through Minnesota, going west to do their hunting. And it just struck me that, you know, we ought to give them maybe the benefit of the doubt, being that Native Americans may want to participate, like all of us on this committee participate for the HRAC as a volunteer. We're not paid. You know, Ben and I are on the executive council. We're not paid. Many of us serve in other boards and give our advice, expertise from our backgrounds that we're not compensated for. And I would expect maybe that the Native Americans would want to participate voluntarily in a project like this that's going to expand their history in the area, whether it's the Dakota or the Ojibwe that may be occupied going back 6,000 years. But to discount it for the fact that we're not paying someone to come to the table, I think we make an assumption that we're not giving money to someone for a very worthwhile project to describe Native American history thousands of years ago. That's all I have.
And I'd like to address that. I appreciate what you're saying, Rick, in terms of the assumption. What I think is more not just, I'll answer this on a couple levels. One, I cannot speak definitively for any group and say that this is. I can tell you about my experience, and I can tell you about the general sentiment that I know of through communities of color, which is that a lot of times when we're dealing right now with a lot of history that has not been reflected accurately. And the sentiment right now is that people want things to be accurately reflected, but generally when the idea of going ahead and having a cooperative project, if everybody is coming to the project voluntarily and volunteering their time, I think that groups would be a part of that. But it sets up a disparity when you're bringing one group in with expertise and asking them to volunteer their time. And that is an assumption. Maybe there is an agreement out there, but I'm going just from what we can see in the proposal, that there isn't anything that reflects that. And it sets up a disparity. And we see that a lot where our participation, our consultation is not valued to that level. And so what oftentimes happens, and we've experienced this a lot here at Hallett, where people come in and look at, they want information on the African American community. They want us to provide them the information that they can't get anyplace else. And yet they don't budget in for that, but they pay for their time to come out and talk to us. They pay for their time to compile the information that we do instead of utilizing us in those capacities for interpretation. And it becomes something that then goes through the lens of somebody else who, at any point, if you're voluntarily a part of the project, they can pull you out of the project and decide how to utilize the information and how to use your consultation. This isn't just for communities of color. If somebody was doing this on Scottish history, I would say the same thing. If somebody was doing this on any kind of historical component, and they're going to provide a major part of the interpretive element, there should be some sort of agreement, there should be some sort of arrangement, and there should be some sort of compensation. Now, maybe they have that and they just forgot to put it in the proposal, but that's not reflected in that. And the trend that we see in society has been not to utilize, not to compensate, and not to value it. So it's not as simple as they're just not getting paid. It has to do with how that is valued in terms of the expertise, the input. Are you putting a value on the knowledge, the experience, the interpretation that a group can bring to the table? And what we see so often is that it goes with things that are practical or things that are within industry. It doesn't get the same value when you're talking about cultural experiences.
Annette had something to say.
Yeah, I'm looking back at the proposal, and it appears that there are 2 Native people in the paid staff for this project. And I wondered too if that per diem and travel was partly to pay in addition those people's for their daily involvement. I can't get into the budget detail far enough to figure that out exactly, but Noah White and Frankie Jackson are both listed in the paid staff. So I hear what you're saying for sure, Jonathan. And being part of this sort of scholar gift community where we're all giving away what we research and what we write all the time, I'm sympathetic to that. But I do think it's important to note that there are 2 paid Native American staff people on this project.
Matthew.
So yeah, I similarly agree with Jonathan in that, it's about sort of valuing not only from a intellectual standpoint, but also a financial standpoint, that inclusion and diversity to make the playing field more equal, if you will. And that's incredibly important as well. And then I also hear very much what Rick is saying about sort of getting into those details and assumptions, and kind of following up on what Annette was saying. And I think Ginny's question about TIPOs, you're right. It's the TIPO wouldn't be, paying for that sort of influence. But to Annette's point, I'm reading in one of the benefits of the cooperative project here that, text is being contributed by archaeologists, geologists, or the Prairie Island Indian Community, or PIIC Historic Preservation Office staff, who are already partnering with the TAC on another project in Minnesota. And the PIIC have agreed to edit and review signage, educational materials, and things of that nature. And so, once again, I don't want to assume more than what I'm reading, but reading what I'm reading, it seems more likely that, they're part of this relationship already, and that they're covering some extra costs to mobilize to get this project done. So my more nuanced understanding of the application, reviewing it right now, is that, they are being taken care of. There's some consideration financially in some way for this outreach that's just not specific to this project, and that they're just adding to that through this project, through the travel and the per diem.
Ben?
This is mainly for staff. Under conditions, there are 3. Actually, the first 2 provide a plan. Second, provide documentation of tribal or TIPO agreement. But the third, as this question I have, funding for tribal involvement cannot be conditioned post-award. What does that mean? Is there a law that forbids this, or policy, or what does that mean? Do we have the reviewer on who can respond to that?
The reviewer is coming from a different department, and they're not at the meeting today. I wish I could read through and look at their comments again. That would take me some time since I'm hosting the Zoom. So
I think, Ben, this is
I
Tamara.
think we put it that way because it's hard for us to say, what is going to happen with that. And so that made it hard for us to condition it, but there's no law against it. There's nothing like that. It's just,
okay.
I just think
I read it that
reviewers,
it
it was hard for
can't
us to
add
condition
funding.
it. And I think that's all we were trying to say.
Again, my point would be, let's add, if we can add a condition that this goes forward, if staff has shown that funding has been provided to the TIPO.
No, I don't think you can word it that way, because again, I don't know that you can actually pay TIPOs.
Well, if it's not possible, then they don't get the grant. I mean, I hate to see this thing thrown out, and that's what would happen if we deny this. I'm trying to find a way to save it.
Well,
that addresses the concerns that are out there.
And that says condition post-award. Can we condition pre-award that says that it is, and the broad of funding for the tribal involvement?
Yeah, that's what
something that we can do.
Well,
Carolyn, is that?
This is Annette. Could I ask one question of Jonathan? Who actually do we want to pay?
Right.
I don't have a specific individual or group. What I'm looking at is some of the reviewers' comments, which talks about this. I'm looking at, I don't see anything within the budget. So it's for the involvement. It's basically a value assigned towards that expertise and that engagement. So I'm not saying you've got to go and pay X person.
No, I understand that. But
somebody within this, that it's budgeted in for that. And,
if the budget already calls for the pay of 2 tribal members, who in addition, I don't mean individually, but who in addition would we, even if we could stipulate it, who would we stipulate would be paid?
I think one, you're getting on a very slippery slope when we start talking about the payment of tribal members, because somebody is part of a project and they are also a person of color doesn't mean that the communities of color are then being represented and then being compensated. I think what we're talking about, and with regards to this, is we're talking about utilizing the expertise of tribes, of having their involvement. So it talks about doing outreach, it talks about doing groups and consultations. So I think for that, in many of the proposals that we've seen, when they're doing input from the community, they're offering stipends, they're offering compensation for the involvement. This one is not doing that, or does not appear to be doing that. So what I think we need to have in here is some mechanism that is included that is showing that they're putting a value on the expertise for the community that they're coming from. I like the idea of this proposal. That's the thing that's missing for me. If they had that in, I'd be supporting this and for this. That's the component that I see as largely missing, and the insurance that this will be done in a way that is both accurate and reflects a value of what that, a lot of this proposal is based upon that, what that input is.
Carolyn, did you have anything to add?
I'm not sure if I still had something to add, or if there was a clarification that I need to have based on Jonathan's comments about conditioning it, or.
Well, Ben and I were asking about, it says conditioned post-award. Does that mean they could be conditioned pre-award?
I don't know that we've gone down that path. Typically it's, you know, they're on the path to get awarded. And so I think what I'm hearing somebody say is that, could we put a condition on there, whether they get funded, continued on the path of funding if they don't have some certain aspect satisfied? I don't really have an answer for you today. It's possible. I guess we could get that, try to gather that information before board final approval, but I would shy away from that and opening up that can of worms for this. It really is, it should be conditioned knowing that they're going to get awarded, and what would satisfy this committee if it's conditioned.
I think
Matthew?
this is the question that I think, Ben, we can't condition something that would require them to spend money that they might not have.
Right.
So that's the condition that the reviewer put in. So if we decided, well, you have to start paying people or you don't get the grant, we can't do that because we're not giving them the money to do it, and we can't change their request either. So I think that's the question that you all were having. That's how I read it anyway.
Okay, Matthew?
So I think part of it, and once again, these are my opinions, and sorry for having them unpacked live on camera, but my review did say a lot to unpack here. So I think we're being a little deceived by the review in that, you know, they mention, you know, there isn't a budget for tribes and TIPOs, which I think is an improper use of terms. So I think we should not sort of be thinking that way about why aren't we paying a TIPO, because like we're saying that you don't. But whether or not it's almost coming down to whether or not we believe that they are actively cooperating with some sort of tribal element. And not to go back to my earlier comment, but there is a relationship here among the applicants and the team members and the Prairie Island Indian Community Historic Preservation Office staff on another project. So it says that they're working together and they're agreeing to help on this project as well in this outreach. But they're only asking in this case for the extra travel and per diem cost for that staff to operate on this project, which to me, I would assume means that they're compensated some way for the other work and that they're just asking for costs to cover this specific project. So there's no indication that I don't think that they're doing the right type of outreach or not compensating appropriately. That's my reading of the application as I see it.
Okay, Ben?
In the interest of getting this done, I'm going to make a motion to support this proposal with the conditions listed, but I'm going to incorporate number 3 into number 2 in this way. Provide any documentation of tribal or TIPO agreement to join the project and funding for tribal involvement. In other words, if they can show in a document that was created before that they're getting paid, I think we should do this. If they can't do that to the staff satisfaction, they don't get the money and it just goes back into the pot and choose for small grants. So I think that resolves it in a way that makes sense, but that's my motion.
Jill, I just want to point out that Marika has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Marika?
Everyone pretty much touched on it, but I was going to say, I don't think it's a far-fetched concept to provide compensation. Anything I've done in the community, even if it was the African-American community, ADOS, whatever, I always provided compensation, even things I was willing to do for free, consulting or whatever it may be. When I did it with, like, for instance, Ramsey County, they've always provided me with compensation. And I think historically people have been taken advantage of. I agree with Jonathan.
Okay, I think I might have done that out of order. I think we're supposed to, is there a second for the motion that Ben made?
I'll second it, Tamara.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Matthew?
Question is the condition. Like, I guess I don't understand what the condition would be. Similar to I don't understand quite the condition that we're asking for in the review. I guess the condition doesn't make sense to me.
Well, let me try to explain it.
Yeah.
Again, the staff has direction from us that they have to go to this organization and say, we need you to show the agreement, an existing agreement for TIPO involvement, and that there's compensation. If you can't show that, then you don't get the money. Isn't that pretty black and white?
No, because I think we're using terms of the terms aren't there. I think who would be compensated?
Carolyn, can you?
I said the
you kinda,
tribal representative or TIPO.
Carolyn,
I think that Matt, I think that Ben is getting towards your point. I think that your point of saying that there was another arrangement that is then coming and they're utilizing the staff, they're just asking for compensation for the travel, but there's already another agreement. I think if they can show that other agreement, they're working on another project, and now they're extending that expertise in the agreement to this project. That I think covers. Ben, am I correct on that?
You're exactly right. There's something going on here that's positive.
Right.
They're working with the tribe. And if the staff is convinced that the people involved are getting paid, I think we should fund it. If they can't be convinced of that, the money comes back. And then they can apply next time. And they would have learned a valuable lesson.
And in that condition, if possible, that makes more sense to me. The TIPO part was what I was held up on. If we can get to the bottom of the Prairie Island Indian community relationship and compensation and show that it exists prior to the application, that's a good condition, I think.
And
does anybody else have any other comments or concerns? Everybody understands the conditions? Okay. All right, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those not in favor say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion passes, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jonathan.
All right, thank you, Joe. And thank you, everybody, for that's a good, robust discussion. I appreciate. Yes.
Sorry, this is Melinda. Can you just restate the additional condition so I can get it in the minutes?
I believe the additional condition was for the, Ben, why don't you go ahead and restate it just so I don't mess it up?
Sure, and I'm taking this right out of the reviewer's conditions. Provide a plan for public access needs funding after the end of the grant period, comma. Provide any documentation of tribal or TIPO agreement to join the project, comma, including funding for tribal involvement, period.
Thank you.
Right. Carolyn, can we look at with that what we have remaining in terms of allocation? All right. So $21,269. Can we see which applications would be eligible at this point? Do we have any that would be eligible at this point?
I think we're done.
We may be.
Yep, it looks like anything under that has already been funded.
Okay. So then do we need a motion to reallocate this back, or does that automatically happen?
I think last year you did a motion to allocate it back, so that is fine.
Okay.
This is Ben. I'll make that motion.
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded by Rick. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't understand what this motion is.
Oh, so it is reallocating the remaining balance back into the grants office, the funds, so that they can be used for the other grant rounds. So it'll be allowed for the small grant rounds.
Yeah, got it, sorry.
Yep. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, any abstentions? All right. We have left is we want to review the spreadsheet, and we want to go through each of the applications we didn't talk about so that we can go ahead and give feedback that the grants office staff can use to help people reapply as appropriate. So why don't we do we want to do a rundown of the ones that we funded first, or do we want to do a feedback on all the ones we haven't discussed first?
I would prefer
Carolyn?
that we,
Yeah, just a reminder that some of your committee members have to leave at noon. So if that weighs in.
Okay, so maybe we should just go through the ones we haven't given feedback so that people can offer that first. Carolyn, can you give us a sort? Annette, you've got a question, but I want to, Carolyn, if you can work on a sort of the things. Annette?
I was just going to ask if we could go through them now in alphabetical order, so that it's easier to pull up the grants in order rather than searching through that sheet.
That is a good idea, and we can probably accomplish both things at the same time.
Great.
Okay. So the first one up is the Adoptee Hub. Does anyone want to offer comments or insight on this? Carolyn, I think we'll have to go back to the main everybody so I can see people. Okay. Did anybody want to offer comments on the Adoptee Hub?
I think the comment that I had was maybe they need a small grant first to flesh out their ideas a little better.
Okay, Annette?
Yeah, that was exactly what I thought. It really needs a planning grant. It doesn't appear entirely ready to carry out the project and need. So I'm really enthusiastic about the idea of this project, and I really hope that it gets funded eventually, but I think it could do some more preparation.
Okay. Any other comments? I had this one, I really liked the idea of this, so I ranked this a little bit higher. But I agree with the idea that everybody is saying in terms of what it needs for that component. Bob?
It kind of bothered me that they call it the Adoptee Hub, and yet it's limited strictly to Korean adoptees, and yet there are lots of Russian adoptees and other adoptees here in the state of Minnesota. So I would like to see it either expanded to all adoptees, or just say that it's a Korean adoptee focused project. And acknowledge that straight up in the title. Also, there's an organization, let me find it here. There's the North American Council on Adoptable Children. So I think that there are some other resources out there that they could potentially link into that they haven't recognized in the request.
Any other feedback or thoughts? Okay. The next one is the Aiken County Historical Society. And Carolyn, I actually don't have a list of what we have funded at this. I think you sent that out last night though.
Yeah, according to my form here, the next one that we haven't talked about is Bethel Foundation.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ben. All right, Bethel Foundation. Does anybody want to offer feedback, insight?
This one I am okay. This one, it's a really interesting project, and this is one that, it would be fascinating to see what they come up with. My problem with this, they talk about sharing it with the greater community, but there's no plan on how they're going to do that. Is that workshops? Is it interfaith meetings? Is it seminars? How are they going to reach a broader audience? Because I think this is, it's timely and it's relevant, but I just wasn't sure how they're going to be able to reach people who are outside of their congregation. Just wasn't clear.
I agree too. My comment was, how public is this?
Lindsay?
I thought, so I had the same thing. I thought it would be a really cool idea, but maybe they could do like a trunk component. Some places will create like a to-go type thing and you can take it to the school, and then potentially the kid will want to bring his or her parents back to see the full thing. But
that'd be cool. Yeah.
Any other feedback? Christy?
Yeah, so one of the comments was about that this is a permanent collection that's going to be exhibited before deeding it to the U of M. And I was curious how long it was going to be up for also before deeding it, the completion of the permanent exhibit. I was confused about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like how long is permanent?
Right.
Yeah. And then is it going to go into storage? And a lot of these artifacts are also paper. So how long will they be on display? What is the light levels? How long is it just for the preservation of the artifacts?
Okay.
But my concern was actually about the text and the labels. We have some people in the state who are really good at label writing, and all of them urge shorter labels rather than longer labels. And so I thought that this exhibit could stand to have some greater involvement with perhaps the Minnesota Historical Society, who with some museums who have extensive experience in wording, in delivering the narrative.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much for that. Ben, I'm still trying to get my sheet to short. Do you have another one? It's our next one.
Brown County?
Brown County.
So didn't we talk about that when we turned it down?
Yeah.
I have a couple other things to add though.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
On this one of the concerns I had is window repair is included on the scope of work form, but the work is referenced as an alternate on the drawings. There's also another reference to the through-wall flashing is also referenced as an alternate. It's not clear whether alternates are being accepted or what what would prompt that, what would drive alternates. So that's, again, from what we were given, what is the money going toward? There's alternates out there. Have they been accepted? Have they not? It's not clear. So in addition to the comments that we had the other day where, they've already received $680,000 in previous grants. And I think just, again, trying to spread some of that money around to others in the state was another separate category of conversation.
Right. Any other feedback? All right.
Jonathan, it's Carolyn.
Yep.
If it's okay with the committee, I can read them off, the ones that we would need feedback on.
That would be great. I can't seem to unhide the things on the spreadsheet for some reason.
Yep, no problem. So the next one that we have on our list is Carleton County Historical Society, and the project is the Shaw Memorial Library. There was no motion, there was no discussion on this one.
Okay. Does anybody want to offer feedback or insight?
I can start. This one is, it seemed to me that this one is a little out of sequence. They had a condition assessment done and they've got water issues for sure. It seems to me they should be addressing those before they tackle the entry. Again, it's one of those that, you know, you could be throwing good money out there when there's other things that maybe are higher on the priority list. So I questioned their sequence. You know, typically you want to start from the top down when you're mitigating water, not from, and again, I mean, they've got water coming in from a lot of different places, it looks like, but this is one that just seemed a little out of order.
Okay. Is there anybody else who'd like to offer some feedback? Bob?
It's a fairly minor thing, but I would suggest that they clean up their drawings and specs. Typically, things should be shown one place or the other, but not both. And they had a lot of specifications in quotations that were on the drawings and in the written specifications that has an opportunity for conflict and as well as redundancy. So I think they should just clean up their documents a bit.
Christy?
I was just curious what the mild chemical cleaner that they're going to use to clean is. I mean, just curious for specifics.
Mm-hmm.
Any other feedback? Okay. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, the next one is the City of Belle Plaine Episcopal Church of Transfiguration. And this one came up for a motion, but no motion was offered. And so there was no discussion.
Okay. Does anybody want to offer some feedback? Christy?
So on this one, I had some concerns about the stained glass, the restoration of the stained glass. That it seems like the dollar amount for restoration appears to be based on a proposal written by Gay Palmer back in 2014, which is 6 years ago. And it was kind of confusing because there were two kind of proposals. One seemed to be a little bit more specific than the other one. One just seemed kind of like what they generally do whenever they restore stained glass. But the proposal that seemed to be a little bit more specific is not standard conservation practice. So there were some concerns that I had about that proposal, some pretty big concerns. And then also in the proposal, it states that they would hire a contractor conservator, and Gay Palmer is they're not conservation. So that needs to be reworded.
So Christy, with the 63,000 for the stained glass, did you think that was too high or too low?
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's not too low for sure. I don't think.
Boy, stained glass windows are expensive, aren't they?
They are. Yes. Yeah.
This is Bob. You want to go? Okay.
We're doing a stained glass project right now out at the Fort Snelling Memorial Chapel, and that stained glass price actually seems pretty low for that many windows.
Right.
I have a different technical concern though, and that is that it's standard practice to have some ventilation between the space between the stained glass and the protective glazing. And they didn't show any kind of vents or anything like that. So there's no way of allowing air circulation in there to get rid of any moisture buildup. So they just needed to add some technical changes.
I noticed that too, yeah.
There were also some inconsistencies in their documents between what was stated on the drawings and what was in the specifications. There's comments about removing all paint and sanding everything to bare wood, consolidating all bare wood, and that's usually not the direction we go. And I'm also, the other thing that I thought was just gave me a little heartburn is the anodized aluminum storm windows. That's going to completely change the overall appearance of this building. I would really encourage them to look at other options there. I think that's just going to really and change it, not for the better. So I would really encourage them to consider some options, different options for those. In addition to adding ventilation.
I agree with your comments about the other historical windows and how are they going to treat those? That was also a concern. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, everyone. Our internet decided to fritz. I plugged in my hotspot and I am back with you all.
Though I kind of missed the Captain America costume.
So where are we at right now?
They were still finishing some comments on the city of Belle Plaine.
Okay. Does anybody have any other comments? All right. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, it's the city of Monoman. I'm sorry, I know how to pronounce it, but I always get it wrong, but it's the city hall.
Monoman.
Monoman. I don't know why I'm gonna have to practice that one. Monoman. It's the city of Monoman City Hall.
All right. Anybody like to offer any feedback or insight?
An awful lot of bathrooms they think they need.
Well, I think making the building accessible is a really important project. I'm not sure how that enhances its historical, or I'm not sure that that's a cultural project or that the cultural value will be enhanced by that accessibility.
I can tell you that, my thought was that, one, I think that, the ADA compliance is an essential piece, but my concern was I feel like governments should be going ahead and making this part of their priority budget, seeking out legacy funds for something that any entity should be just doing as a matter of course, but was my concern. So I really felt that that they should be actually budgeting for ADA compliance in everything that they do in order to ensure that, because that's essential. It seemed like this was a stretch to come in to get legacy funds in order to do that versus putting it in through whatever general fund they have.
Which isn't very much. Monoman's one of the poorest counties in the state of Minnesota. So.
Mm-hmm. Bob?
HRAC did fund an accessibility project at the Virginia Street Swedenborgian Church, but I think that that's a bit different because it actually will allow the church to become more self-sustaining by increasing their ability to rent out their facilities and so forth. I would agree that it seems to me that the city itself should be making some funding available for accessibility projects. And one minor little detail, if they're making these just single user facilities, then they don't have to have separate men and women. They don't have to have multiple. They would only need one.
And my comment is really, it's not specific to this. I said that in other proposals that we're doing the same thing. I do really think that federal government and city government should be providing ADA funding, period. But that would not have kept me from supporting this. That was my personal take on just the idea around that. Other feedback? Okay. Carolyn, what's the next one that we have?
Yep, it's the city of Pipestone, the senior center. This one was a motion to fund, but it failed in vote. So I didn't know if there was additional discussion for this one.
Okay. But we did have some discussion already on it, right?
I would think so, since it was a motion for fund and it failed in vote.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional comments that they want to add? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, the City of Rochester, the Plummer House Water Tower. This one had no motion and no discussion.
I actually really like this one, so I'm not going to be a very good one.
Does anybody else want to offer some feedback?
I scored it fairly high, but just because we didn't have very much money, I felt they could wait a year and come back.
Yeah. That was my thought exactly. My comment, what I wrote down in my comments is high degree of architectural integrity. Peer review comments are a little off base, I thought. The project is well conceived, well planned, has a high probability of successful completion. It's a significant attraction with 15,000 visitors a year. That's a lot of outreach. It's got a significant architect, Ellerby, and its association with Henry Plummer is significant. And it's an engineering. I always like projects that showcase engineering or something other than in this case, an architectural expression that has an engineering component was a real positive for me. But I also thought that it wouldn't necessarily hurt if it waited one more year, but I would really encourage them to come back next year.
Any other feedback? All right, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, the City of Hopkins, construction ADA compliant restroom. And it looks like there is a conflict of interest on this one. So maybe if the person that has the conflict can just identify who they are and maybe just state that they are not providing any comments.
Who has the conflict of interest?
Rob, is this you?
When is it?
City of Hopkins.
Masonic building, their history center.
I don't see it on my list, so I don't think that I am the one.
John, are you able to determine?
Oh, City of Hopkins, sorry, it's out of order. Yes, I'm the one, sorry.
Okay, and Bob, you don't have to leave the room, just not comment on this. So we've
okay.
Noted that. Anybody have any comments they want to offer? Matt?
My comment is more of kind of a grant perspective. The budget is very lump sum. If there was some way to break it down a little bit more, I'm not a specialist in this area to tell you how to do that, but it's too large ticket items, so a little bit more detail on the budget for me.
Other comments?
That was my comment, was not enough detail in the budget.
Annette?
And I only want to say on its behalf that if people can't access the historical society, it makes that historical society not as useful. So this feels very different to me from the City Hall elevator project, because this really does, people who need access will be able to have it when this is done, and they don't have it now.
My only comment was, is there another alternative that's more
right.
Economical?
Right.
A concrete ramp. This was spendy. I mean, it's a nice solution, but is there another alternate that could be looked at that's less money?
Right, I agree. Thank you.
And my comment holds for this one. I mean, I ranked this higher because of the fact that it was doing ADA, but I still feel philosophically just that there should be other funds that are looking at this. So, okay. Carolyn, what's our next one?
I have Cottonwood County Courthouse window.
Mhm.
Okay. Does anybody want to offer feedback?
No, you go ahead, Jenny.
No,
I'd like
Christy, I talk too much. You
no,
go.
I'd like, but you are the expert on building.
No,
I'd like,
you go first.
Well, my main thought on this one was I was confused about the treatment of the windows. The original oval windows, there's 18 of them, and I wasn't quite sure if those were going to be replaced. There's just not a lot of information that I saw. Maybe I missed something about how those were going to be treated and if they were going to be treated differently than the other windows. And then if they're going to test for the original paint color, I didn't get that either. Those are the comments that I have.
My comment on these was that the proposed windows, although an improvement probably on what they've got, don't match the historic profiles. And that's not required, but if we're going to pay for it, I think they should be closer. It should be a closer match. So again, I think they've kind of locked into a window manufacturer. I think there's others out there who have a product that would maybe be better. I'd encourage them to maybe check out some other window manufacturers to see if they can get something that's, I mean, if you're going to do this wasn't a custom window, but you can do custom windows and get a better match. I'd be more inclined to pay for that with grant funding. The other thing, and phasing is a little tricky. What happens if they don't get funding next year or the following year or the following year? Now you've got a building that's kind of all over the place in terms of its look. And I think that's a little risky for legacy grant funding as well. So this is one that they probably have some time. I mean, the windows are definitely coming to the end of their service, but they've got some time to raise some money. And, it would be better, I think, to tackle this more comprehensively. But I would really encourage them to look at someone like to look at the Pella architectural series, or just consider some other options for replacement that could get them closer to the historic profile.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Carolyn, what's the next one?
The next one is the Duluth Art Institute Association, the DAI Lincoln Park exterior. This one was a motion to fund, but it failed in vote.
Okay, so we have given some feedback. Is there anybody who wants to offer anything additional? All right, thank you. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, the Institute for Agricultural and Trade Policy, the Caroline Crosby House. There was no motion and no discussion.
Anybody like to offer feedback?
Yeah, this is one that I would encourage them to do a condition assessment or an HSR before applying for construction documents. I mean, I think the need is there, and I think it's a great house, and it's a contributing structure in a nice historic district in Minneapolis. So I think they've got a good shot at, if they were to apply for a planning document, I would definitely be supportive of that. So whether that's a condition assessment or a full HSR is up to them, but this is one that I think I would be more comfortable funding construction documents if they had some planning.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. Carolyn, next one.
Yep, the Casson Alliance for Restoration, the immediate needs for the Casson Public School. This one was no motion, there was no motion and no discussion.
Okay. Anybody like to offer feedback?
We've sure seen this one a few times. I really feel for this group. They are trying so hard to save this building, and they have been for years. But for me, it was just hard to justify expenditure on an unoccupied building with no plan for the future in a competitive round like this. Again, if we had a lot of money, mothballing this building, in the hope that someone someday will find a use for it, you could justify that. The other thing that was a little awkward, I think, in this was the multiple primes. I don't know how you'd coordinate what they're trying to do with the multiple primes, and that just might be their capacities. They've got a lot of different people doing different things, but hard to coordinate that. So this is just one, given the competitiveness of the round and their kind of it's just not certain what their future is. This one was hard to put forward in this round for me.
Any other feedback? Christy?
I was just the method of mold remediation, and somebody, I think in one of the peer-reviewed comments or something, talked about this and using volunteers for mold remediation. Just the whole process seemed not well thought out to me. And I just don't know where the mold's coming from. If it's just a matter of cleaning it off the surface, or if it penetrates deeper. It just seems like I think that needs to be planned a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Carolyn, what's the next one?
Yep, it's the Lower Phelan Creek project, the Wakani Teepee Center Visitor Interpretive Experience. There was no motion and no discussion.
All right. Anybody want to offer feedback?
Well, this is Annette. I really liked this proposal actually, but the lack of clarity about what mobile meant really sabotaged this grant for me. Not just that the peer reviewer didn't understand it, but I also didn't understand it, and I didn't. So is it mobile? It doesn't matter. But that was my concern. That seems really an essential part of this project, but I couldn't figure out what it was.
That and the fact that they were citing standards that don't exist.
Well, that
was a little interesting. So then that for me then just makes you question what else they're saying. Because they were kind of not necessarily talking about the mobile tour process in a way that made sense to the reviewers. That doesn't make sense to me, but if it doesn't make sense to people who know what they're supposed to be talking about, and then they're citing standards that don't exist, that was kind of a flag for me. But it would be a great project, and that the fact, I mean, and this is one that I really wanted to like this one, but then there were, all those little, I wouldn't say red flags, but maybe orange flags that were raised. But the fact that the fact that 106, according to their research, this could be a potential national landmark. That's this is a significant site. I'd like to see this one move forward, but move forward in a way that we can support next year.
Right. Any other feedback? All right, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, the Minnesota Transportation Museum, final design construction documents. There was no motion and no discussion.
Anybody want to offer feedback? Okay, so I guess I will have to with this one. This one was a real concern for me because when I started reading it, I was worried that I had a conflict of interest as I started reading it because it mentions things like the Rondo Roundtable, and so I had to go and do some research. And I think what this may have been is that this was written a couple years ago and then brought in. So the Rondo Roundtable is a group that it's organizations within the Rondo community. It's a loose knit kind of collaborative. A couple years ago, it was meeting, and then it kind of went slightly dormant, and then has started recently back up with a new coordinating partner and people. So I checked with the coordinating partner, they had no idea about this. So when it says that it's going to use the Rondo Roundtable as advisors and that there's compensation, the Rondo Roundtable, I had not heard of it, and I thought, did I just miss something? And no, checked with the coordinating partner, they did not have awareness of this. Marvin Anderson is not the president of Rondo Avenue, Inc. He helped start that years ago, but he hasn't been connected to them for a couple years. I know that the application with this, this group this is one of the groups that had come to us to seek out information around the African American community. We've never received any compensation for that or any kind of conflict along those lines, but when they started doing the project, which I think this is the project, suddenly all the staff quit. And the whole organization kind of got shuttered. And this is a couple years ago. And then it seems like this has been picked up from there. So I had concerns around this because I don't think this is an act. I don't know where this is actually. And there's a lot of holes within it in terms of the collaboration with the community partners, because the Rondo Roundtable group doesn't know about it. I didn't know about it, and Blue Stem has had some challenges around some of their sensitivity with the things. They came to one of our groups and talking to some of our seniors about the Rondo community and that their homes were lost. And it really hurt a lot of our seniors because their comment was, no, our homes aren't lost, they were stolen from us. They were taken, the government came in and used eminent domain to steal people's homes and remove them from the community. So this is one that did not seem to actually have all of its ducks in a row because of some of these holes. I'm not sure where this fits or where it is right now. So I ranked it very low because of that. But honestly, I wrote Carolyn, I said, I may have a conflict. I don't know. I need to research this and find out. And in looking at all the stuff, our last even consultation with this was two and a half years ago.
That's pretty definitive.
All right. And seeing no other feedback, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, it's the Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, the Mitchell Hamlin History Center permanent exhibit. There was no motion and no discussion.
Can we just use our comments from last year?
I knew you'd be enthusiastic about it, Jenny.
Yeah. Okay, since I opened that can of worms, I just don't see that this is a legacy grant. I think this is such a personal, or just such a focused group, and it's important to them, and that's great. But similar to Bethel, who's going to see this other than people who are there, and even people who are there, are students really going to see this? So I'm not clear who their audience is or who they're trying to reach with this, and it's such a kooky, in my opinion, just this kind of freestanding weird little kiosk of stuff. It just seems really awkward to me. Always has. That's no secret. So I just don't know that this is something that resonates or rises to a state funded historic legacy grant. I mean, it might be a nice project for them, but I think this is something that they should be funding, not the legacy grant.
Any other feedback? Lindsay?
I think I made a note about there was an online component to this. I thought maybe, I mean, I agree with Jenny about your comments, but maybe that could be a separate or like a starting point to kind of build the interest. You'd also reach people that aren't at the school, but maybe just going for that first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what I object to more than anything is just the construction of the exhibit. The content, if you can get the content out, there might be some benefit there, but just not seeing how the exhibit enhances anything.
And if we were to replay last year's comments, I would be saying, yes, but I think it is still an important project. I think it's an important story. I think that it weaves in the sort of history of women in the legal profession and of minorities in the legal profession. So it's the content that I especially applaud and am interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I would support it for that reason, but I understand the objections.
I just wish they would think of a different way to present it.
Yeah.
This is Ben.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything that's been said, but I have a question mainly for staff. Here in this case, the peer review summarized really how I feel about this project. So the question is, does the applicant get access to that document?
Carolyn?
Carolyn, I can speak to this, or you go ahead if you want.
Nope, go ahead, Gillian. The peer reviewers this year.
So we actually, Carolyn and the grants office team talked about that this past year because previously applicants did not have access to peer review feedback. So this year we changed it to tell the peer reviews that the peer reviewers, if someone requests to see their feedback, they can see it. And none of the peer reviewers chose to say they didn't want to do that. So anyone who requests the feedback will now be able to read their peer review, which I think is a really positive change.
It's still anonymous, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So they would only see what you guys can see, which is the, job and number of years and whether they're active or retired.
So again, this reviewer very succinctly summarizes all of my concerns. So if you get any pushback, especially from the applicant, please send them a copy of that. I would encourage that.
I'd like to point out that in their, I think it's Museology who's doing the exhibit design. They're putting in case lighting, which we never recommend case lighting in any exhibit, especially something that is this light sensitive, as paper is. So. And I just am wondering, because if I'm understanding correctly, it's a large window that they're putting in. Is that correct? But they don't explain any kind of light monitoring or any kind of environmental monitoring, window treatments, anything like that. So.
Anyone else? All right. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Otter Tail County, the Phelps Mill building repairs. This one was a motion to fund, but it failed in vote.
Okay. Does anybody have any additional feedback they want to offer? Okay. Seeing none, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Pope County Historical Society, the agricultural research and exhibit script. This one also was a motion to fund, but failed in vote.
Does anybody have any additional comments they want to offer? All right.
I think we should have funded it.
I just had a general question, and it might just be that I misunderstood. In the attachments, there was like their exhibit plan. They have their interpretive plan, which makes sense, from 2018. And then their exhibit plan, and then an exhibit script. So I was a little confused about why the exhibit script like was in there, but isn't that kind of what they're creating? Or did I miss something obvious? Does my
I
question.
thought what they were going to do is use that exhibit script now to build an exhibit. Todd, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, just as a point of information, the application states that they're reworking an existing script. They, through a process, they determined, I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear the sirens out the window. Through a process, they had an exhibit script, but wanted to go back to the table. That previous exhibit was not funded with the grant program.
Okay.
And what I would add is I think that doing an exhibit on agriculture in Polk County is really important. And so I encourage them to do what they need to do and come back with another request.
Any other feedback? All right. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, I'm gonna butcher this name, so I'm sorry. The Probesfield Farm Living History Foundation, they're HSR. There was no motion and no discussion.
All right. Anybody want to offer feedback? Jill, I need to step away for just a minute. Can I just turn this over to you?
Sure can.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments on this one? Feedback?
I think that my comment was that I wondered about their procurement procedures. And I also just felt they needed to kind of flesh it out a little better, maybe do some more planning before they came back with another request.
This one was unclear what they were actually asking for. They just need to kind of figure out what it is that they want. This one was kind of all over the place. I think the reviewer comments on this one were spot on.
Anybody else?
The notes that I had, the purpose of the application is unclear per the reviewer, I think is what Ginny's saying also. And the reviewer said the concerns that they have could not be conditioned. So I just wasn't clear the meaning behind that the reviewer wasn't totally behind this project.
Yeah, and there was just so many questions about this one, so many things that were unclear, and the photos of things that weren't necessarily applicable. It's almost like a brochure. Lots of people in the farm fields, and nothing really supported the application. So this is one that I just think, again, would encourage them to come back next year, but really focus on the application, what the application criteria are.
I went to the farm website just to try and figure out what the organization was and what they're doing. And there's a pretty terrific video that some NDSU undergraduates and graduate students did that it really makes a very strong case for the importance of this site. I would like the application to make that case for itself as well.
And really, I think, why the interior? What about the exterior? I think there needs to be more explanation in the application for what they're trying to do and why they've chosen this particular order for the request.
All right, any other discussion on this one?
I guess I would say one more thing is that because the NDSU students did such a good job, I think it would be really useful if the farm called on college students in the surrounding area and called on faculty members in those surrounding colleges to help them sharpen and focus what it is that they want to do and what it is that they want to interpret. They really could use a little historical and a little bit of historians' support and encouragement, I think.
All right, Jonathan's back. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. Carolyn, what's our next one?
It is Ramsey County Historical Society, expanding access to history, planning a digital publishing program to increase the diversity of authorship of local history. There was a motion and no second, so therefore no discussion.
Okay. Does anybody want to offer feedback on this?
Well, as the person who made the motion that didn't get a second, I'm really interested to know what people's concerns were. I thought it was a pretty imaginative, creative way to enhance what we know about lots of underrepresented groups.
For me, this is one, again, because it's not my area of expertise, the reviewer concerns, I thought gave me reason to question, whether they were ready this round. I think it's, Annette, I agree. When I read through this, I'm like, oh, wow, what a great idea. And then the reviewer concerns, I think, brought up some things that I wouldn't necessarily have come to on my own. But again, not a bad application, but one that could be strengthened with a little bit more thought, perhaps.
In this one and others, I think it's really easy to support the idea.
Yeah.
And to say to people, this is a great idea. Don't be discouraged by this decision not to fund at this time, but take our comments and suggestions and bring it back to us in a way that we can fund it.
And that has happened time and time and time again over the years, where we bounce one because it's not ready and it comes back and it's so much better. I can think of a few off the top of my head that went from 3s to 9s, just because of, they just, again, taking the time and listening to the feedback and then focusing that energy in a way that we can understand what they're after. So much better the second round for some.
I would even encourage them to apply for a small grant and do a little pilot and just test it out a little bit so they can see what works and what they need to fix, and then draw in some professional oral historians or writers to help with this. Excuse me, whoever I interrupted.
Anyone else? Okay. Then Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yes, it's the Rice County Historical Society, the Alexander Faribault House construction.
Okay. Anybody want to offer some feedback?
I can start.
All right.
Or Matt, were you raising your hand?
I was. I believe this is also maybe a resubmission. I could be wrong, but the name sounds familiar. But this was a case, like Ben said earlier, that the peer review is really good for me, at least. So if you're listening, applicant, I suggest requesting said peer review, because I think it's a good one.
This one was really, oh, Bob, you're going to go? Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say that they linked their cost estimate to their statement of work, which nobody else has done, and I found that really helpful. So they should be congratulated on that, and other people should be encouraged to do the same.
This one for me was really hard to evaluate. Specifications were not provided. The drawings reference them, but we didn't get a copy, so it's really impossible to evaluate what they're up to. Very few details describing the work. No detail for sistering 2x8s to 2x4s. I did find it in the engineering memo, but it's not part of the documents. It should be. because that makes a difference in the outcome. Yeah, there's, they talk about replacement, but the extent and the threshold governing replacement is not clear. They talk about, it may be necessary to replace entire lengths of whatever they were talking about at the time, but they're unclear about that, and there may be cases where that's true, but it was just very vague. The documents were vague and incomplete.
Anyone else? Okay, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, it's Sauk Center Area History Museum, the restoration of the Blue Valley Creamery. There was no motion and no discussion.
Anybody like to offer feedback on this one?
This is one that this is kind of a tragic little building, I think. It's been vacant since 2015. Annette, you had asked for this on some other projects, why is it historic? What is its significance? This is one I had to look up because it wasn't immediately obvious. But it is a contributing building in a historic district, not for architecture, but for criterion A, broad patterns in history. So this is one that, I think I would limit, and I don't know if we can even do this, but I would limit grant funding to the facade, to the contributing portion of the building. But then again, that's a little hard because it's not an architectural, it's not significant for its architecture. But this one, in addition to just the fact that I was wrestling with the significance of the building, the language in the condition report is a little bit off, and the scope is unclear, and some of the line item for masonry testing was crazy high. So this one there were a lot of things that just didn't quite mesh on this one. That being said, I'm not sure what I would do to strengthen. I mean, there's a lot you can do to strengthen the application. I'm not sure that the outcome would be maybe different. Yeah, this one was tough for me.
Yeah, Lindsay? And then Christy.
So one of my issues is that, like all of my building issues, that it sat vacant, and I guess I just wondered what their plan was for funding it. Like, I have a hard time trying to give money to a building that isn't occupied. Like, if you already had businesses in there and you just need to, whatever, I'm not an architecture person, fix something, water infiltration, then that would be easier for me to justify the cost, I guess. So that was my 2 cents.
I mean, that's why this one got such a low score from me, is just the enduring value, the measurable outcome, and the public benefit were all not as obvious as some of the other projects.
Christy?
I agree with what Lindsay just said, that I didn't understand what the long-term benefit was going to be. And then on a much smaller thing, they mentioned that there was a sign that was, they age it to the 30s, so it's not historical, but they mentioned it in the proposal, but they didn't mention what they were going to do with it, or if they were going to try to bring back the original sign with the original name, or how that played into it, and what's going to happen with that sign, because it is still a historical artifact that's attached to the building.
Annette?
One way they could strengthen the proposal from my point of view would be to give us a plan for interpreting the creameries in the local dairy industry. Though those creameries are really important and they played really important roles, but the building itself is only important if insofar as its importance gets interpreted and presented and made accessible to the public. So they're on the cusp of a very important story, but they need to dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yeah, there's about 4 more left and it's noon. Do you want to continue on?
Is everybody okay with continuing on? Yep. Yes.
Okay. Stearns History Museum Archival Collections Management System update. There was no discussion and no motion.
Okay, and that's,
I just have a conflict of interest on this one that I wanted to.
okay. So just, you can stay, but don't comment. Anybody else want to offer some feedback?
For me, I didn't have an issue with this one necessarily. I pushed it down towards the bottom of my list more because they're a frequent flyer and they have a lot of previous grants. I think they've come up with, I think we've awarded the Stearns History Museum to $356,000. So, I mean, just based on the competitive round, I, pushed them off to a future round just to give other people a shot at some of the funding. That was my only, my only comment.
Any other feedback? All right, Carolyn, what's our next one?
Tower Sudan Historical Society, the Tower Fire Hall exterior rehabilitation. There was no motion and no
Conflict on this
discussion.
one.
Sorry?
It's Bob and I have a conflict.
Okay. Bob will not comment on this. Anybody else want to offer feedback?
Bob's still here.
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
putting anybody out at this point.
Bob, I was actually encouraged to see this one come back with a much better plan in place. This is one that we've seen before, and we questioned the order and their priorities. I think that was before McDonald Mack came on board. The order that they were trying to do things made absolutely no sense to me, and so I think we were pretty critical of them in years past. This is, a much improved proposal. The ask is just way too high. I just don't, there's no way we can give, I think I did the math once. I think this is like 12% of the budget going to one project. So for me, what I would encourage, again, they're making progress. They're moving in the right direction. I would really encourage them to look for ways to phase this so that, we're not trying to fund, close to $400,000 at one time. That was just one right off the bat. I just, that dollar amount just was kind of a non-starter. I think that would have been the highest ask we'd ever awarded if we had awarded it. Or close to it.
Other feedback? Okay. Carolyn, what's our next one?
Yep, it's Washington County, the historic courthouse exterior restoration design. There was no discussion and no motion.
Anybody like to offer feedback on this?
You guys gonna make me talk again? This one I had a couple issues with. I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. I'm not exactly sure what the scope is on this one. And, they talk a lot about replacement. They talk about repair. They're kind of back and forth on a bunch of different possibilities there. And then you look at the fee or what they're asking for the eligible amount, and it's just so low compared to the amount of work that they're proposing. It just there were some mismatches here. And so, it looks like they were possibly replacing the lantern, but I'm not, it clearly needs work, but I wasn't sure that they'd actually done any of that condition assessment to really determine whether complete replacement is really merited. Bob, I don't know if this one, struck you as being a little funny, but there were just some mismatches on this one.
It seemed that way to me too, and particularly the fee seemed way out of line with what they were planning to do.
Yeah, 6% fee for if they were going to repair it, and 3% if they were going to replace it. Just really out of alignment.
One of the things I wrote down was the photos were so lousy, you couldn't really tell what was good or bad, or like they could do a little better on that too.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly it needs work. And again, Annette, this would be one that we would put in your county courthouse collection of, they need work. They all do. And you want to support it. But this one was, just a little unclear, the direction they were trying to head.
And again, I want them to make a case for the historical significance. That it's the oldest does not automatically make it important or meaningful, or it needs a story and a rationale.
All right. Carolyn, so our next one?
Yep, this is the last one. It's Washington County Historical Society, Washington County Lumber Exhibit. No discussion and no motion.
Okay. Anybody like to offer feedback?
This one had some language that was kind of alarming to me, just in their proposal. So it really kind of made me a little leery of what the what the interpretive program might be. And I don't know, maybe that was just me, but I think the reviewers, obviously it wasn't just me, because the reviewers kind of expressed some of the same concerns. But I mean, for me, where they're talking about Native Americans who passed through the area versus immigrants who settled. I mean, again, we talk about sensitivity. This one just seemed to be maybe not quite right in the language and just the way they were presenting it.
Annette?
I want them to apply some more imagination to this subject. It felt like a pretty conventional kind of exhibit. And I think there are going to be lots of people who are interested in however they do it, but I would love for them to talk about it in environmental terms, or perhaps I too recently read Richard Powers' Overstory, which is about the life of trees and trees. There's so much more that could be said and done. So I want them to go take a retreat and just think and talk and laugh and walk around trees to open their imaginations to the possibility of this really important story that county has to tell.
And I shared, Jenny's concerns, and they didn't seem to have much input from Native communities. And I, again, go back to how things are interpreted and through what lens, and especially considering, the land that we're talking about, that was a significant issue for me to not have that, and how they were describing it, the natives who passed through. So yes, that was, yes, a major piece for me. So any other, Christy? You're muted, Christy.
Okay, so again, just the just more information on what kind of exhibition materials and the type of lighting and things like that they're going to put in, because again, these artifacts are light sensitive and that kind of thing that they're putting in. They do talk about rotating the exhibit, which is really good, and I think that was the only one that I saw that did talk about that, but there was no detail about it.
And Lindsay?
So I do have a train going by my apartment right now, so I'll try to speak quickly. Just two positive notes. I liked the interactive components that they mentioned, or or they mentioned that they would have interactive components. And then I liked that they took the school curriculum and applied it. They took it into consideration when they were planning. So.
Okay. Anybody else with feedback? All right. We have got that. So I am looking now at our agenda in terms of what we need to do. We've had the discussion, applications not recommended for funding. Carolyn, is there anything that we need to do before I go into announcements?
Jonathan, I think you have traditionally gone through and read through those that have been funded. If you want to do that this year, that would be awesome. Again, and then other than that, I would just make a call out to make sure that I think I hit everything. But if my colleagues who are with me on today, if they saw anything that I missed when I call out, if they would mention it, maybe after you read the list.
Okay. Do you want to pull that up onto the screen, or I'll just run through them from there?
Yep. And how would you like me to sort it, alphabetically or by organization? Would that?
We can do it alphabetically. That's correct. That's fine.
All right, I'm ready to share.
All righty. Okay, so as we are wrapping up our meeting today, I'm going to go through alphabetically, and I think we need to scroll up a little bit. It seems like we might be missing one.
No, I think that's it.
Is the adoptee, was that a different? I thought that was one of the A's.
But it wasn't funded, right?
Oh, we're
These
just
are only the funded.
We only need to do the funding. Okay, good. So here we have, these are the ones that are funded. Aiken County Historical Society, the ACHS Collections Inventory pre-application, the American Swedish Institute Critical Restoration of the Turnblad Mansion Veranda, Armory Arts and Music Center, Duluth Armory Architectural Plans and Specifications for Re-roofing, Capone Art Park, Conservation Treatment for Pompeii, a sculpture by Anthony Capone, Cathedral of Our Merciful Savior, the Cathedral of Our Merciful Savior Sanctuary Roof Rehabilitation Project, Chippewa County Historical Society, the Swenson Farm Museum House Conditions Assessment, Christ Lutheran Church on Capitol Hill, construction document preparation, City of Coleraine City Hall masonry and roof repairs, City of Sandstone, Robinson Park Cultural Landscape Report, City of Tracy Phase 1 Reconnaissance Survey, City of Bellevue Historic Odeon Theater roof repairs, City of Canby Historic Canby Theater construction improvements, County of Nobles, Worthington Armory HVAC system, Dakota County, Mississippi River Greenway, South St. Paul Stockyards Interpretive Node Fabrication and Installation, Dakota County Historical Society, George Daniels Exhibit Design, Dodge County Wasoja Seminary Ruin Stabilization Construction Documents, Dodge County Historical Society, Borden House Phase 3 Construction, Farmer Labor Education Committee, the Farmer Labor Movement, A Minnesota Story, Hennepin History Museum, Archival Collection Arrangement and Description, Houston County Courthouse Phase 1 Rehabilitative Construction, Lake of the Woods County Historical Society, Exhibit Plan for Lake of the Woods County Historical Society, Minnesota Museum of American Art, How Immigrant Artists Shaped Minnesota History Through Visual Art and Creative Exchange, Mower County Historical Society, Grand Meadows Church Quarry, Murray County, Chicago, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Omaha Turntable Construction Documents, Murray County, Deinhardt Holt Phase 1 Construction Repair Project, Nobles County Historical Society, Nobles County History Interpretive Plan, North House Folk School, Jim Scott Fish House Historic Structure Report, Norwegian American Historical Society digitization of OE Rollbag papers, Olmsted County Historical Society HCOC lighting project, Ramsey County Historical Society, St. Paul building permit and ledger digitization, Reclaim Community Bauman Hall working drawings, architectural plans and specification, Regents of the University of Minnesota, Minnesota's landscapes, documenting environmental history through archival sources, Science Museum of Minnesota, 10,000 Years of Minnesota's Prairies, opening new windows into the Peterson Archaeological Site, Sinclair Lewis Foundation, Sinclair Lewis Boyhood Home and Carriage House Construction Grant, St. Louis County Historical Society Collections Accessibility Initiative Catalog Inventory, St. Olaf College Discovering Musical and Broadcast Stories in the St. Olaf College Archives, Sylvan Township Camp Ripley Sentinel Landscape Comprehensive Literature Assessment, the Anderson Center for Interdisciplinary Tower View Historic Structures Report, Winona County Historical Society WCHS Image Digitization and Rehousing Project. Those are all the ones that are being recommended. Grants Office will forward the Historical Resources Advisory Committee's funding recommendation to the MNHS Executive Council for review and final approval. The Executive Council has the authority to change HRAC recommendations. The Executive Council's decisions are final. After the Executive Council approval, all applicants will receive notification about the decision no later than December 1st, 2020. Releasing information or discussing applications after today's meeting is not allowed by committee members and MNHS staff until after the Minnesota Historical Society Executive Council has made the final approval. Do any of your colleagues have anything else to add? Or committee announcements? Okay. Yep.
I have committee announcements.
Oh, please.
Yes. So first of all, Gillian will send an email, maybe not next week, but the following week to all of you to get your volunteer hours. And the volunteer hours should include your review time and the meeting today. So please respond to her. It's important we keep those and we report them out to the legislature of again, how important it is your time, and it's not paid, it's all income. So it's very important for us to keep track of that so that we can let the legislators and other bodies know of your time and value to us. I want to thank Bob Mack personally and professionally for his time on the committee. It's sad to say that Bob has served his 4 years, which is the full term that he can serve. He can take a year off and come back if he chooses to do that, and we would encourage that. I know a thank you isn't enough, Bob, and I wish we were all together in a room so we could shake hands and pat backs and talk about all the wonderful things that you have contributed to the grant program. Hundreds of reviews, which resulted in lots of grants going out the door on the large round over the last 4 years. So just thank you very much for your time, and please don't stop, even if you don't want to come back to the committee. If there's other ways for you to be involved, we would encourage that as well. So thank you so much for that. A big thank you to all the other committee members. A lot of the things that happen behind the scenes aren't seen by our applicants. All the time that you take over the last 2 to 3 weeks reviewing 69 applications takes time to review those, score those, get a rating in to us, get the information, and then come to this meeting prepared to have the conversations and make those tough decisions about recommending funding and not to recommend fund. To my colleagues, I appreciate you every day more than you'll ever know. I see how hard you work and all the accomplishments that you do for this committee, for the applicants, and I so appreciate you. Thank you so much. You make my job and my life a lot easier and less stressful, and I'm so glad to have all of you with me. And then applicants, I just want to say one big thank you to the applicants. We wouldn't be here without you, your passion. I love your passion for all the projects that you submit to us. It's the reason I come to the program more than anything else, is because I get to see the wonderful things that you are passionate about. I wish we could fund all of you. I know there'll be some happiness out there. I know there'll be some sadness, and I'm ready for you, for the sadness to come to me, and I will take that. We always take your questions and your concerns and your complaints to heart. We try to make the program better with those, so that it only makes the program better when you provide us that information. And I do submit that out to the HRAC, either by email or at their next spring meeting. We'll talk about those questions and concerns that you have about the process and what has happened today and transpired. So I just really appreciate all the applicants, and I encourage those ones that didn't get funded to come back, have conversations with us, and we can have conversations with HRAC so that you have so they can't say no to you next year. There's no reason for them to say no to you next year. So that would be great. And then spring meeting, I've heard some agenda topics. Yesterday, there were some agenda topics for the spring meeting, which we'll announce probably in March or April of next year. Fingers crossed for that one to be an in-person one. I love seeing you guys' faces on this, but I really appreciate it when we have an in-person one. And then that usually is the one we travel out to a site to visit. So I really hope that can happen, because I know that's important to all of you to go out and do some site visits with an applicant and see firsthand what the impact has been. So those agenda topics, I will collect them, and I will probably email them out to all of you, and to get some more feedback on what direction you want us to go to propose that at this spring meeting, so you have deep, good conversations at your spring meeting. So I think that's it for my announcements, but appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. I'll say the next deliberation meeting of this committee is tentatively scheduled for November 4th and 5th, 2021 at the History Center, St. Paul in the 3M auditorium, we hope. I will also say, Bob, you will definitely be missed as much as you have left the room many times. I think that's a testament to just how much expertise you bring to this committee and how much your input has been very helpful. I know for me personally, and I think for the committee overall, in order to understand and look at some of the work in a very critical way and give honest and appropriate feedback. I want to say that thank you to all the committee members for your time and effort around this. This is a large process. It takes a lot of input, and your help to make sure that we make great decisions around this. I especially want to say thank you to Carolyn, Todd, Jillian, Megan, Laura, Melinda, John, and Tamsin. All of you are phenomenal. I have run a grant program before. I know how much work goes into this. It makes it so much better that we have your insight, we have your reviews and the pieces and all the work that you do. Thank you for working so hard and making this possible. And as you're going forward and giving feedback, I'm happy to offer myself to help have calls with grantees and things, if that will be of any assistance. And I'm sure some of the other HRAC members will consider that as well. Is there anything else anybody has for the good of the body? Seeing nothing, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And anyone can make that.
I move to adjourn, Tamara.
Tamara's moving. Is there a second?
Second.
It is always in order and non-debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Thank you all for your service and for your time. We stand adjourned.
Bye.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.